What's going on, everybody? It's Coach Matt at the FF Mediators. Today, we're going to do a walkthrough on the 2024 QB draft class, give you a profile of what's kind of happened for their season so far, what the outlook is going forward for them, and kind of how we're using that in our dynasty portfolio for our teams and how we're going to manage those players going forward. But, Coach, how are we doing today? You ready to talk some quarterbacks?
Man, I'm doing good. Let's talk about them.
All right. Well, let's jump straight into it. We'll start with the 101 of the draft class last year, which is none other than Caleb Williams, who goes to the Chicago Bears. Want to pull up his stats real quick here, kind of show you what's happened so far for the season. We're looking at 2,600 passing yards with 14 TDs, 5 interceptions on the year, so protecting the ball okay. Obviously, we want to see the Bears score some more points going forward because that's kind of been the struggle, and the losses have not been there on the year. But, Coach, you're the Bears fan. Kind of tell us how you feel about this first year.
Man, I'll tell you, as a whole, I feel pretty good about Caleb Williams. Obviously, he's had to deal with a lot of turmoil when it comes to not just the head coaching issues, but the offensive coordinator problems. Combined with, he's obviously had plenty of offensive line issues, especially earlier in the season. Some of that has gotten better throughout the year. But as a whole, I feel like Caleb Williams has really progressed. It was a bit of a roller coaster early on, but the last few weeks in particular, he has looked really well. I mean, he's on pace for 3,700 yards, 20 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He set a rookie record for the most passes thrown without an interception. Now he's thrown 232 without an interception. So that part has been really, really impressive. He's done a good job of taking care of the ball, giving us a chance to win. I mean, as a Bears fan, I feel really good moving forward with Caleb Williams moving into next season, especially.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hope. It's going to be nice to see who might step into this offense. I know we all expect kind of a new coach. Coach likes to talk about Ben Johnson, and maybe that's going to be a good marriage for Caleb Williams, and we can kind of see what can happen there. But I mean, there's certainly playmakers for him to work with. I mean, we'd hope for Rome to get a little bit more involved, and I don't want to spend too much time on the others around him because we're focusing on Caleb here. But we're just a few months out, Coach, from when we were taking him at the 101 in rookie drafts. Do you still think that would be the 101 today if we were redrafting?
I mean, obviously, I think Jayden Daniels has played really well. I mean, so there would be some debate there, but I mean, there was always that debate. So, I mean, as a whole, I'm pleased as a Bears fan, even that we have Caleb Williams. Right now, I see his ceiling is really high. There's a lot of room to grow still too. On top of that, I do think the Bears have to shore up that offensive line moving forward to help him continue to improve and be more successful. But I do see a guy who has gained more control of the offense. He has looked better since Thomas Brown took over as the offensive coordinator. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of room for him to grow. But, I mean, he does make some magical plays at times, no doubt. And he has a big arm. He's shown that he can make any throw on the football field. I just think as a whole, I'm pleased. And if you drafted Caleb Williams early on, which obviously a lot of people did, in Dynasty, they should feel pretty good about it. I'm sure at times earlier in the year they were worried, but now as the year has progressed, you look forward and project over the next 5 to 7 years. You think, well, hey, I've got something here.
Yeah, and I mean, looking on the season, he's quarterback 15. I do think that, like you said, he's showing hope where he can kind of step in and make those plays because it's definitely there. Although he's getting sacked at times, a lot of times he's running for his life. And if he can just get a little bit of time, he can make some magic happen because the arm is there. I mean, we've seen several throws, especially that one down the sideline with Swift on the wheel route. Like that was a magical throw. Big time play he made. So I think it's there. Let's just give him some time. Coach, I want to ask you the question now. If he's over on Keep Trade Cut, he's quarterback 10. Is that about where you'd have him? I mean, the names around him are C.J. Stroud, Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, Drake Maye, and Bo Nix. Is that a little bit too high or too low for you?
No, I mean, I feel that's pretty good. I mean, he's played well. I mean, there's a lot of room to grow. I mean, you can make an argument between all of those guys one way or the other. But just the fact that as a whole he fits in there, that's kind of where I think he is at. But it's all going to come down to what happens with the coaching situation and the offensive line. That marriage between play caller and quarterback is really important. So all that's going to play a huge role, in Caleb Williams' career moving forward. Like we'll talk about Bo Nix in another video, but for instance, Bo Nix and Sean Payton has been sort of a magical connection. So if Caleb Williams can get some of that, that connection with a new play caller, that'll be a big step in the right direction for him.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. If he can get someone that's going to be able to finalize this offense, kind of make it a marriage between the two, with play calling, I think the sky's the limit. I want to ask you, Coach, as far as it goes for his value in Dynasty, if you were going to trade him for just picks, what are you looking for? Are we still looking for a pretty good haul of 2 to 3 first? I'm not saying you can get that easily, but um, I think that's the value I would want.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, especially considering where you drafted him at. Like, I'm gonna have to get a huge haul to give up on him right now. I mean, that's where we're at right now. It's going to be a huge haul. I mean, he's proven he can be successful. He's proven he can play. Like, you could possibly have yourself a quarterback for the next 10 years that you don't just a plug and play quarterback. So yeah, I'm gonna have a whole lot for that guy.
Yeah, I think he's a big time playmaker that you're going to have to pay up to go get. So I'll leave it with
Mm-hmm.
this, Coach. If you are on a contending team and you need a quarterback, are you buying him? Is that someone you think can help you make a playoff run?
Probably not. I'm not going out of my way to buy him right now for the rest of the season. Like, I do think he's playing well, but I think there are other options you could go buy for cheaper that could help you and will play just as well down the stretch.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm probably in the same boat. If I can get him on the cheap, maybe someone's looking to move and I have the flexibility. Obviously, I'd take a guy like Caleb Williams on my team, but if I'm contending and I need a quarterback, I don't think that's the route I'm gonna go. But let's move on, Coach, to our 102 of the class, which is going to be Jayden Daniels going to the Washington Commanders. Big time fantasy implications here. Looking at his stats, I mean, heck of a year for him. He's just going to be a really big time playmaker going forward. He's got 2,800 passing yards, 15 TDs, 6 interceptions on the year. QBR is fifth in the league at 71.9. Coach, is Jayden Daniels. How do you feel about him? What's your thoughts on his year so far?
Man, he has shown that he's a big time playmaker and has a incredibly bright future in the NFL. I do think we've probably seen. I don't want to say the word regression because I don't think that's true, but he's had a few struggles the last couple weeks. So I mean, which is expected. That's normal. I do think if I'm a Commanders fan, which I know you are, I'll let you talk in more detail about Jayden Daniels. I mean, you have to be really excited. I mean, I would be.
Yeah, I mean it's the first time I've had anything to root for as a Commanders fan. So having the quarterback position solved, and especially on a rookie contract, allows the team a lot of flexibility. Now, I understand he was the second overall pick, so his contract's a little bit more than a situation like Brock Purdy and San Fran. But as far as it goes for this year, I mean, he's changed the offense. This offense couldn't score anything in the past, and they're one of the best teams in the league on scoring in the first quarter, just scoring in general. They're really efficient in the red zone. They're getting points. They're not turning the ball over. You couldn't ask for a better position as far as it goes for the Commanders. And looking at his fantasy implications, I mean, the rushing stats are great. He's got 108 attempts on the year with 590 rushing yards. That's pretty great. That's a bunch of points that you're adding to your team, and on top of that, he has 6 rushing touchdowns. And that's not to say that he hasn't been throwing the ball, because he's been throwing the ball effectively too. I mean, he's this quarterback 2 on the season so far. Those 2,800 passing yards. A lot of these games, they've been blowing people out too. I mean, they've got a great
Mm-hmm.
point differential on the year. So I think there's a lot to expect to the Commanders going forward, and I think they're going to have a lot to prove to people and what they can do.
Yeah, well, my question to you would be, how do you feel about Jayden Daniels when it comes to moving forward? let's say the rest of the year, if you're a contender, do you want Jayden Daniels as your quarterback?
Absolutely, I want Jayden Daniels as quarterback. I mean, he's a difference
Mhm,
maker. I mean, I've already highlighted he's quarterback 2 on the season. You know, last week against Tennessee in Week 13, he had 28 points. The week before that against Dallas, where they got beat, 32 points. Like he's putting up
mhm.
a ton of fantasy points, and some of his worst games came before that. I mean, he's got a couple single digit games. One of those was the one where he got hurt and he only played 14% of the snaps. So, you know, that's not going to be the standard for him going forward. But I think there's going to be a lot for him to provide for your fantasy team and your fantasy lineup that could win you in the week and possibly win you a championship.
Yeah, and his feet are so valuable, especially in fantasy. Like that's the one thing that puts him over the top. I believe he has 6 rushing touchdowns. I think you might have mentioned that, but
Yeah.
that's a big deal. Like that's the thing that puts him over the top. I mean, he's not quite Jalen Hurts when it comes to rushing touchdowns, but he would be next in line.
Um, my question to you, coach, is I think looking back at it, Washington certainly made the right pick. Um, it's performed well, and that's not to slight the other quarterbacks that we're going to talk about here soon. Um, but as far as it goes, as QB rankings overall, how high should he be over on Keep Trade Cut? He's quarterback 3, so
Mhm.
that's pretty high. That's a lot of fantasy promise for a young quarterback going forward. I mean, he's 24 years old. Pretty good situation. Obviously, Washington can improve their playmakers around that offense because right now it's only Terry McLaurin and a good rushing attack with B Rob and Austin Eckler. So I look for that team to make a move at wide receiver, whether that's a guy like T. Higgins or T. Mac coming in the draft this coming year. I'm not sure. But coach, is quarterback 3 too high for you? I mean, he's ahead of guys like Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, and Patrick Mahomes.
No, I mean, I think that's right where he needs to be now. Fantasy and him being my quarter. I mean, obviously, I would rather have Patrick Mahomes as my quarterback if I'm, the GM of a team. But in fantasy, that's different, right? Like in
Mhm.
fantasy, I'd rather have Jaden Daniels because he provides so much with his legs, especially moving forward. So you got to want Jaden Daniels on your team. Like Jalen Hurts is right there with him. Like Jalen Hurts, his value is that he gets in the end zone. Like Jalen Hurts has 14 passing touchdowns to 12 rushing touchdowns. Well, Jaden Daniels has thrown more touchdowns, one more, but has half as many rushing touchdowns. So to me, fantasy wise, I mean, he fits right in there, top 3, top 5 to me because of that rushing upside. And there's been a really awesome marriage between him and Cliff Kingsbury thus far. And that's something that I only looks to grow unless Kingsbury leaves and goes somewhere else to be a head coach. So,
Yeah, I mean, if he leaves, then that's certainly going to impact the offense. But one would hope that
mhm,
it doesn't completely derail it, just because he's kind of proven to be a difference maker for this team already. Just making big time plays, throwing the ball and running the ball. So I'm really excited for what's going to happen in Washington going forward. I mean, if I'm looking to trade him on my fantasy team or anything like that, which for the most part I'm not. I'm not going to say he's untouchable because I'll trade most people, or most players, that is. So
mhm.
I think that it's something that if I'm going to move him, I need to get great value coming back. So I need a surefire starter at quarterback, whether that's a young guy or just tearing down a little bit. And I want some sort of impactful pick. So at least a really early first in this coming draft. And if not, a couple more firsts on top of that. So I think the 3 first minimum has got to stay. And one of them is going to have to be a pick. I'm not shipping Jayden Daniels off for the 110, 111, and 112. I don't think that's going to help your fantasy team unless you've got some sort of crazy quarterback room.
Yeah, totally. I mean, unless what if you got an offer like Bo Nix and a first for Jaden Daniels?
I think that's still probably a little short for me, but I wonder where you fall on that because I wouldn't be surprised if you kind of lean the other way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly close. I
Hmm.
mean, it depends on how high that first is necessarily to me, but I mean, it's something I
Good
would
point.
still have to step back and think about because both have been really good this year.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about Bo Nix later, but as far as it goes right now, you can't deny his production.
Mhm.
And if that was an early first in Bo Nix, it would be tempting. If you put names to the pick, does that change your mind? If you're saying, well, I'm just a running back away, and you get Genty and Bo Nix for Jayden Daniels, that's a pretty big deal. I mean, that could change your team. I mean, I know it's betting a lot on a rookie, but it's a rookie that we're all really excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, like, if I've got Jayden Daniels, you're going to have to pay me a lot. It's going to have to be something like that before I'm going to consider it. Um,
Yeah.
that's just how high I believe in Jayden Daniels and his ceiling moving forward.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot of potential in Washington, a lot of things we can look forward to, and kind of see what can
Mhm.
happen in the future. And let's see if they get another big time playmaker for him. It's gonna be fun to watch because Jaden Daniels
Mhm.
has brought Terry McLaurin to have that wide receiver 1 year that we've all been waiting for a long time. But let's go ahead and let's jump onto our 103 of the draft class, coach, which is Drake Maye going to the Patriots. Um, has a solid year. Obviously, he didn't start the first 5 games. Played a little bit in game 3, but week 6 he took over and he's quarterback 25 on the season. He's played pretty well. Looking at his stats, he's got just under 1,700 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and he's been a little bit sneaky athletic, rushing the ball with 345 yards on the ground, adding a touchdown there. So, Coach, how are you feeling about the young quarterback out of North Carolina?
Yeah, he's played really well. At times, he's really looked like a prototypical NFL quarterback. He does run the ball at a fairly high rate. He's a really underrated athlete. Um, I mean, his family has. I mean, these guys can play. Drake May was also a really good high school basketball player in North Carolina. People don't realize that. I mean, this guy's a good athlete.
Hmm.
But at the same time, like, I'm concerned about the playmakers around him. I'm a little concerned about what's going to happen in the future offensively in New England around him. I mean, that would be the one thing that would concern me a little bit if I'm a Drake May owner moving forward is what is New England going to do to help him, give him more pieces to work with on offense?
Yeah, and I think they're going to have to make some type of investment there. They've got Ramondre in the rushing game. I think Ramondre is just an okay running back. I don't think he moves the needle towards anything special. The pass
Mhm.
catchers is where he's hurting. He needs some help on the outside to kind of alleviate some of that pressure. And I expect New England to make some sort of move to address that issue. But right now he's been connecting a lot with Hunter Henry. We'll see how that goes going forward. But a quarterback like that, it's got to be at least a little bit concerning that he's in a division with Josh Allen. So like this team is going to have to make a lot of moves to compete. And obviously you've got Miami there too with Tua and Tyreek Waddle, the Speed Show. They've kind of been caught here recently, and they're not producing like a lot of people thought they would. So the division is going to be interesting to monitor going forward. But as far as it goes for dynasty value, coach, is Drake May a buy or is he a sell for you? What are you doing?
Yeah, he's totally a buy for me. If I'm rebuilding, he's a guy I might try to go get because I think I could get to him a lot easier than I can get to Jayden Daniels, Bo Nix, or Caleb Williams. I think I could get to Drake May a lot easier. So that's what would make him a buy for me. Especially if there's a team that's contending and I'm holding a guy like Tua, then I would be willing to say, all right, here you want Tua, let me have Drake May or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Somebody with that kind of level of talent that would probably going to help that contender win. But at the same time, Drake May is going to help me win in the future, I believe. I mean, his QBR is
yeah,
87. He's played solid as an overall quarterback. So I like the upside of Drake May.
yeah. I like it too. I think I'm in the same boat as you. I'd be buying if I could. I mean, he's currently QB 11 over on Keep Trade Cut, um, and if you do exactly what you just said, and you're rebuilding, and you could take a guy like Tua, maybe Jared Goff or Baker Mayfield, names like that, where you could get a little bit younger and you could, possibly net something. It's all going to depend. I realize those quarterbacks are behind on Keep Trade Cut, but right now people are paying to win championships, so you can
Mhm.
take advantage of that and maybe get a little bit more on top. But as far as it goes for the season, he's played well. I mean, he's not blowing anybody away, but he just doesn't really have much to work with. Um, we'll see what happens with coaching if Mayo gets to keep the job. I know we've talked a little bit about that amongst ourselves. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen, but coaches kind of alluded of what happens if they get a replacement. But is Drake Maye someone that you envision if he got a little bit of help on the outside could be a playmaker forward and kind of pushing this team towards the playoffs?
I really do, and I think it will help too if New England gets more of an offensive mindset as a whole. It just seems like they really are committed to let's just play defense and run the ball. Some of that's due to their talent, and I totally understand that aspect of it. But I think Drake Maye, if you give him a bona fide stud out there at wide receiver and an effective tight end and running game, like Drake Maye's going to be a really good player in the league for a long time. So, I mean, he's definitely a guy I'm going to go get if I can get him.
Okay. Now, let me ask you a question because we're kind of hitting the point of where these other quarterbacks that we're going to talk about here in a minute are coming into play. Would you rather have Drake Maye or Bo Nix?
I'd rather have Bo Nix. I mean, I just the future to me seems clearer with Bo Nix and his situation with Sean Payton and what's going on there in Denver. That that's the only aspect. Like Drake May looks as good to me physically and stuff as Bo Nix, but I'm just not real sure what things are going to look like in New England next year. Whereas I know even if Denver does nothing, Bo Nix is still going to be super productive for me next year.
Yeah. And that's a situation where if you move Drake May for Bo Nix, you're going to get a plus. So I
Yeah.
would take advantage of that if you could. Certainly something to
hmm
think about. Now, I think I know your answer to the next question. Would you entertain J.J. McCarthy or Michael Penix for Drake May?
I would not unless I got a serious plus with him, only because of the unknown. Like Drake May has looked like he can get the job done. I just don't really know about the other two guys, so it makes it scarier. But I mean, there's a world where if I'm the Drake May owner and my team is not great, that I would say, okay, I'm gonna roll the dice on this. I'll trade Drake May for Penix and a plus. You know, can I get Penix and a running back for Drake May? Then maybe I would, or McCarthy and a running back or something for Drake May. Then I would.
Yeah, there's a lot of risk with those two names, so you kind of got
Mhm.
to know what you're getting into because what's going to happen with Sam Darnold? I don't know. Are they going to stick with Kirk Cousins there in Atlanta? That's a whole nother issue that we're going to have to work through and
Mhm.
kind of really dissect this offseason because I think a lot of it is just going to depend. And we'll talk about more on each of those quarterbacks when we get to them. We can go through their situations, but I'll end it here, Coach, with another question for you. When we're talking about Drake May's dynasty value, does he fall back into that same category of I want a good amount of first round picks and one of them needs to be impactful?
Absolutely. I mean, that's you got to have multiple firsts, and one of them needs to be a guy I know for sure. I got to know I can get something good for.
Yeah,
I would pose a question back to you:
sure.
Drake May or Anthony Richardson?
Drake May, easily for me. I know Richardson's looked a lot better in the last 2 weeks, and
hmm
I commend him for that. I think he's played his two best games of the season in the last 2 weeks.
hmm
But for me, I think that Drake May is more stable and he's going to be given more time. I mean, we've already seen Anthony Richardson miss games due to health, and we've seen him miss games due to benching. And I'm
Yeah.
not entirely sure, but I would imagine that Drake May and Anthony Richardson have a similar total amount of games played in their career. I can't
hmm
imagine it's much different. I'll look that up real quick. Drake
Well,
May
this
has
season they
appeared
both played 9, I believe.
exactly. There you go. They've both played 9 games, and
hmm
Drake May didn't start the year, so I think that it's a little bit safer. I'd rather have him just because I'm still not sold that Richardson can put it all together. I mean, the end of that game last week for the Colts, they still didn't quite trust him, but we don't have to get too much into Richardson. Where do you fall
Right.
on that, Coach?
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. Like Drake May's upside has been higher. I mean, it, it's hard to believe, but I mean, Drake May's just QBR, just overall quarterback rating is like 23 points higher, and they've played the exact same amount of games this year. So I'm liking Drake May and the foundation moving forward.
Agreed. Well, let's jump on to our next quarterback here, coach. At the 108 in the draft, we had the Atlanta Falcons kind of surprising everybody and taking Michael Penix. That was a big time move at the moment. They had just signed Kirk Cousins to a massive deal. And Kirk Cousins has been a roller coaster this year. He's had some real highs, including a primetime game where he scored a ton of fantasy points for our teams. But then the last 3 or 4 weeks, he's really, really struggled, especially with the turnovers and kind of making plays, missing throws. His age is showing, the lack of movement with the Achilles is showing. So it's kind of up and down. Coach, what are your thoughts about Michael Penix, the Atlanta Falcons, and kind of what's going to happen with this quarterback situation?
Well, Matt, this is a tricky one to me.
Mhm.
Obviously, they're paying Kirk Cousins a lot of money. That matters. Kirk Cousins, like you said, has looked really good throwing the football. Sometimes not. Like here recently, he's really struggled. I think a lot of it's going to come down to how the Falcons finish the season. Can the Falcons win the division? And the division was set up for them to win. It's been sort of gift wrapped for the Falcons, who have an abundance of talent on offense, a decent defense. This should have been the year the Falcons win the South. If the Falcons find a way to do that and you make the playoffs, then I think they may ride with Kirk Cousins again. If they don't, then it could be Michael Penix time. That being said, if I'm a rebuilding owner, now might be the time to go try to get Penix, and
Mhm.
grab and stash him for later. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think right now is probably the cheapest you're going to get Penix, should it work out. Obviously, I know that's easy to say, but that's kind of the situation we're in. If if the Falcons kind of struggle the rest of the year and we get a benching of Kirk Cousins, I think they will play Penix. And if Penix performs well, and I talked about this the other night with Hoff and Pete, if he steps in and let's say Kirk loses the next 2 games against the Vikings and then loses to the Raiders, and the Falcons are very frustrated because, like you said, the South is a division that should be won by the Falcons. They've spent a bunch of money in trying to get involved and invested to win this division, and they've just kind of been ho hum as far as it goes. So I think if you can get Penix in there, where he takes on the Giants, Washington, who struggled on the back end, and then Carolina, that's a situation where he could surprise people and play well. And that's momentum into the offseason. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen because I think it all hinges on how Kirk Cousins is going to play going forward. But I'm not opposed to buying him. I get he's 24 years old, and I understand that they have Kirk under contract for 3 years. I believe 2 more years after this season. So you'd be looking at a 26-year-old starting quarterback. But we're also not too far removed from when the Green Bay Packers started Jordan Love after 2 years of sitting. And you know how old he is? When he first started, he was around 26 years old. So it's not that far fetched for me to see him really taking time to develop in Atlanta. Yeah, I think that teams are now seeing that maybe we need to wait on some of these guys. Maybe they need to adjust to get into rhythm. Not everybody's going to start right away like Jayden Daniels and perform well, or Bo Nix. That's kind of the outlier.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you there. Like I really like what Atlanta did. I really like their plan of like let's just sit him and let him develop. Like I think that's going to pay big dividends for them and Penix down the road. So let me ask you this question: would you rather have Michael Penix or JJ McCarthy? Which situation do you like better moving forward?
I still lean JJ McCarthy. I know Coach knows this. I made a trade earlier in the year where I have Michael Penix and I traded him to the Kirk Cousins owner for JJ McCarthy. And the reason I did that is because I have Justin Jefferson, and Coach and I say this all the time that Justin Jefferson is the best player in the game. So I want the guy who's attached to the best player in the game. We're seeing Sam Darnold be really relevant um, in Minnesota right now, and Sam Darnold has had a lot of question marks on his entire career. Have those been corrected? Yes, they have, and that's to his credit. But I also think it's part of the offense. It's part of having Kevin O'Connell as your head coach and having really, really great playmakers in Aaron Jones, TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, and Jordan Addison. Like those are impactful players that they can have right now to use in their lineups. So I think that if I can get the quarterback that's throwing them the ball, there's value there. But I would be remiss if I didn't tell you the risk because there is risk.
Yeah, absolutely. There's major risk. The unknown alone is risk. So if you were a Michael Penix owner, what would you have in order to move him?
Uh, I think if I'm moving him, I would need probably close to a first. I'm not sure you're going to get a first from anybody just because he's not playing right now. That's going to be your toughest sell. So I would want at least 2 seconds, somewhere around that. So that way I can try and make a move and maybe replace what I paid because I think most times Michael Penix was around the 203 to the 208, somewhere in there in most super flex drafts. So if I can recoup my costs and add something on top of that, I'll take it. But personally, for me, he's a buy. I'm not going to sell him unless I need something to go and win a championship right now. Because what we know is these quarterbacks can grow in value, and should he start, his value could triple. And you can't say the same for a lot of wide receivers. Should they hit, a lot of times they're only worth about a first or two firsts. If quarterback hits, you can have them worth three firsts or four firsts. So that's a major investment for me.
Well, man, what you just said has got me thinking. Like, if I'm a contending team and I'm drafting late in the first round, I know that's coming. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to sending like 111 for Michael Penix. Like, to me, that's a
Hmm.
risk I might be willing to take, especially if I can stash him and just hope it works out. Because if it works out, I'm gonna get 3 times that investment. So I like that risk.
Yeah, spot on. If you can flip that and really make a profit off that as far as it goes value, then you should. Um, I think looking over at Keep Trade Cut, this kind of might be leaning towards something that we should talk about. He's quarterback 21. So he's pretty far down there. His value is just, like I said, right there around a late first. 2 seconds. It just kind of depends on how the picks fall. But is that an investment that you think we should be making, Coach, for our teams if he's quarterback 21?
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I mean, that seems like that's a roll of dice I'm willing to try. I mean, I understand the unknown. Like, I get it. There's unknown with pick 111 most times too.
Hmm.
Like, that's sitting around this past year like a Keon Coleman. You know, Xavier
Exactly. Yeah.
Legette. Like, yeah, I mean that to me that's a risk worth taking.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums it up for us. I mean, I think there's a real opportunity there, so we should probably be buying Michael Penix if we can. Like you said, it's a investment that we could really turn into something that might be bigger down the road, or if you have yourself a quarterback going forward, that's massive for your team. But let's just carry on here, Coach, and let's move to our next quarterback on the list. We have the Minnesota Vikings, who took J.J. McCarthy at the 110 overall with a trade with the Jets. McCarthy this year has not played. He had the injury in the offseason. But, Coach, what's your thoughts on McCarthy? I'm really interested to hear what you have to say.
Man, this is an interesting one. This one's even tougher than the Michael Penix one we talked about in the previous, video. When you think about Bo Nix, man, you think about how difficult not excuse me, not Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy. You think about JJ McCarthy, like this is hard. Like, Sam Darnold has played so well, unlike Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has been a roller coaster. Sam Darnold has been outstanding. Um, what's going to happen with Sam Darnold in Minnesota? I mean, does Minnesota open up the wallet and find a way to pay him? I don't think they can, but I think it's going to depend on how far he goes in the playoffs. Like, if the Vikings get in and the Vikings make a run, let's just say they make a run to the Super Bowl. You're telling me you're going to look at the fans in Minnesota and say we're just going to let this guy walk? Like, I don't know how you can do that. So This one's way more tricky to me than even the Michael Penix situation because Sam Darnold's no old guy. There's a lot of unknown here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, McCarthy just 21 years old, so he's super young. I know a lot of people critique his play at Michigan because they didn't necessarily throw the ball a lot, but when he did throw the ball, he was efficient and he was accurate. And that's something that I think could be really good in Minnesota because they typically have had a decent run game and they beat you over the middle with guys like Justin Jefferson. You've got big time playmakers there in Minnesota, like no denying that. And Sam Darnold has had an incredible year utilizing those playmakers. It's also great coaching. And I don't know how much of that falls on Sam Darnold and how much of it falls on Kevin O'Connell, but that's going to be the big test this year. Because, like you said, they're going to have to open the paybook and pay him. Because whoever is going to want Sam Darnold, they're going to pay. He's played really, really well, and he's proven that it's not really kind of a fluky couple of games where he stepped in. I mean, this team is in playoff contention, and they're 9-3, so they're right there competing for the NFC North. And I'm not sure a lot of us would have said that before when they signed Sam Darnold. He's definitely rehabilitated his career and kind of shown a new arc for himself. But on keep trade cut right now, JJ McCarthy's quarterback 18. And his value is not too crazy. It's right there around Michael Penix, where it's a late first, couple seconds, depending on where those picks fall. Is that an investment that you would make, Coach, just like we talked about with Michael Penix?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I'm willing to take a little bit of a risk on. Like I said, the Sam Darnold thing makes me nervous. However, I do believe that if he gets to play, like he's going to play well because Kevin O'Connell is so good. Like I do believe that. Like I think if McCarthy plays next year with the weapons around him in Minnesota combined with the coaching that he gets, like I would look for him to be successful. I mean, there's a lot of people that say, if he could do it with Sam Darnold, he can do it with JJ McCarthy. Now, there's some truth to that. Now, Darnold has obviously made a lot more stops in the NFL and has been around the block compared to McCarthy. But that being said, I mean, I like McCarthy's outlook. I mean, he's definitely somebody I would stash. I don't know that I'd be willing to pay a first for him, though, right now. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd have a hard time paying a first. That might be what his value is, but I don't think you're going to find a willing buyer. If I could trade 2 late seconds, I'd absolutely do it. Um, if you got offered a guy like Bryce Young in a second or JJ McCarthy, where would you fall, Coach?
Man, that one gets trickier because Bryce Young's finally played a little better. But I really think I would
Hmm.
roll the dice. I would probably roll the dice with McCarthy right now, especially
Yeah,
due to
I
the
think
weapons
I would
around
too.
him and the offense.
Yeah, I think that's okay to think about and okay to do, just because, like we've said, he's attached to great playmakers in Carolina. There's still a lot of question marks, and Bryce Young has played a lot better, but I'm not sure that a lot of the names that are floating around McCarthy's value are going to be players that you could necessarily tier up or tier down with. I mean, we're talking about guys who are going to be impactful in fantasy. Anthony Richardson, Tua, Trevor Lawrence, Baker Mayfield. Those are all the names that are right in between where JJ McCarthy's ranked on keep trade cut. And those are names that you have to kind of stop and think about. Am I competing? Am I rebuilding? The situation matters.
Yeah, I mean, it totally does. Like to me, like if McCarthy played as good as he could possibly play, he's this year's version of Baker Mayfield. Like to me, that's his sort of his ceiling. That's why I would prefer to have Baker Mayfield because of the known versus the unknown ultimately.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a lot there to really explore in this offseason. I mean, we're gonna have to kind of see how it unfolds before we make that final investment. But yeah, JJ McCarthy for me is probably a hold buy if I can afford it in a rebuild. Just kind of going to depend on what's happening on my squad. But let's jump into probably the best pick in rookie drafts if you made that selection, which is Bo Nix, who was drafted at the 112 in rookie drafts or excuse me, in the 2024 draft to the Denver Broncos. A lot of times in rookie drafts, he fell to the back end of the first round or even into the second round, depending on your league. Coach, I'm going to let you take over here because this has been your guy.
Yeah, man. Like I've been preaching Bo Nix since before the draft last year. Like he obviously he has played outstanding. A lot of that is due to the large amounts of experience he got in college, combined with getting really solid coaching from Sean Payton in Denver. But the thing that Bo Nix brings to the table that a lot of people didn't really believe he would bring is that he can run the football. He's very active out of the pocket, and that makes a huge difference. 2,800 yards already, 17 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. Not to mention the Duke can run. Like he's a big time player, and it with tons of upside due to the fact that they don't have a lot of weapons, and he's still producing. That guy gets somebody to go alongside Cortland Sutton out there. Um, it's going to be even more impressive.
Yeah, I think you make your best point there at the end is, he's out here producing quarterback 7 on the year, been really consistent in the last 8 or 9 weeks. He doesn't really have a playmaker that he's working with. I mean, Cortland Sutton certainly is out there a big target, who's getting 10 targets a game, but
Mm-hmm.
outside of that, it's been Troy Franklin. It's just been Vele. The rushing attack has been all over the place. Whether it's McLaughlin or Jamison Williams, they have a lot of needs on offense, and he's still producing. I mean, being a top 10 quarterback and being a rookie even more is impressive.
Yeah, especially given what's around him, and the thing is, like we talked about, he doesn't have a lot of playmakers. He has been the playmaker himself, getting out of the pocket, getting the ball to literally anyone. Like you said, the running game's a mess, but Sean Payton is so daggum good that he has found a way to make Bo Nix look like Drew Brees. I mean, really, there's a lot of similarities there in their style of play. So I really look for his ceiling is so high and his stock is rising. Like you want Bo Nix if you can get him on your team, no doubt.
Yeah, I'm absolutely buying if I can. I don't know if anybody is selling him, but if you can go get him, it's worth looking into. Keep trade cut. He's QB 12. We mentioned previously when we were talking about Drake May. Would you rather have Drake May and a pick, or excuse me, Drake May or Bo Nix and a pick? I'd rather have Nix and a pick. Um, but whether you can get that deal done or not, going to depend on your league. Sean Payton has gone out of his way to go and get Bo Nix for this team. Like he said that all offseason after the draft that this was the guy he wanted, and he was actively involved in making everyone else think they were into MccCarthy. And whether all that's true or not, I don't know, but he said it, and he's backed it up on the field with Bo Nix and him having a healthy marriage so far.
Yeah, well, and I think this is true of Jayden Daniels also, what I'm about to say, but there's not really a quarterback outside of Josh Allen that if you offered me that guy for Bo Nix, I wouldn't have to pause for a minute to be like, yeah, like I might would rather have Bo Nix long term than most anybody outside of Josh Allen. So I mean that's something you got to really think about. And I think that's true with Jayden Daniels. Like these guys have proven they can throw the ball and they can produce with their feet. Like those are the things that really matter. Not only that, they're getting good coaching, they're getting good play calling. Um, so that really makes their ceiling even higher.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Coach. It really does make their ceiling that much higher. It's interesting. I mean, you pose the question of, do you have to pause when you get offered Bo Nix for some of those names? I mean, if you have Justin Herbert and you got offered Bo Nix in a first, does that make you stop and go, whoa?
If I have Justin Herbert and you offer me Bo Nix in a first, I'm taking Bo Nix in the first. I'm not easily. Who would have thought we would be sitting right here where in a spot where if you are the owner of Bo Nix and I offer you Patrick Mahomes for Bo Nix straight up, what are you going to do?
That's a tough question. I mean, I think short term it's a lot easier to answer if it was redraft. Dynasty, I think I'm gonna stick with Mahomes and just think that he can figure it out. But if I get a bunch of things thrown in with Bo Nix for Mahomes, I'm with you. I think I might take that deal.
Yeah, especially when you think about the value he has with his feet and the age difference too. Obviously, if I want
Mhm.
somebody to quarterback my team as a coach or as a fan, I would rather Patrick Mahomes be my quarterback. Like that's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying in the fantasy world, the numbers and things that Bo Nix is putting up at his age and his coaching and all of those things, I mean, that gives me pause. Like Bo Nix has really produced.
Yeah, he absolutely has. I mean, it's been a wild run for him. So for both of us, I mean, Bo Nix is a buy. Coach called it in the offseason. He said it was a buy. Um, Said it in our very first video right before the season. You need to get Bo Nix on your roster. And, here we are. He was absolutely right. Bo Nix has proved it, and he's absolutely done everything he can to help you win a fantasy championship. And I don't really see that stopping anytime soon because with this offense and keeping him involved with Sean Payton, there's a lot of opportunity for it to grow, even if they just add some role players, some veterans, let alone a young, impactful player from the draft.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. So I think that's going to do it for us on this recap of the rookie quarterback class. It's been really fun to walk through this. Can't wait to see what's going to happen with this 2025 rookie class, which I'm sure we're going to be talking all sorts about going forward. But this 2024 class, coach, is certainly one that I think we can all look back on and say is pretty good so far. I mean, lots of fantasy production, lots of potential for Penix and JJ to make this class that much better. It's not what we typically see. We usually only get one quarterback that hits, but here we could possibly have five that are really impactful for our fantasy teams.
Yeah, man, this class has been outstanding. I mean, really, it really has. Like it has a chance to be that great quarterback class you look back on and say, "Man, that class was special." There's a lot of upside there for sure. I'm really excited to see what happens to these guys over the next 5 years.
Yeah. But if you've watched this, we appreciate you watching. Go ahead and put in the comments what you're doing with the fantasy quarterbacks from the 2024 rookie class. We'd love to know what you're doing, what your thoughts are, who's surprised you, who's disappointed you, and who do you think might be the best? Do you like one of those sleepers in Penix or JJ McCarthy to kind of step onto the scene and make some moves? But be sure to like the video, give us a follow over on X at the FF Media, subscribe to the YouTube, and of course, go over to the Face Off Sports Network and follow them. You can catch us live every single Wednesday at 8:30 and look for our content this offseason where we're going to be talking all sorts of dynasty, mock drafting, trade questions, rebuild strategies, everything you can think of. But we will catch you guys then. Thanks.